see how this is gonna go. Hello writers, my name is Mylee J Miller, and today I'm making a YouTube video for the first time in a very, very long time. If you're watching this and you've been here for a while, then you know my last video was posted in January of, I believe, 2022. Now I'm posting this video and I look like hot garbage. Unlike the last video, I have gained weight, which isn't my favorite thing. My hair is wet like it was in the other video, and at least I'm wearing makeup. Today I'm doing an unedited or lightly edited video for you all in a different format than my vlog. I have obviously moved house, I'm living in a different space. I am kind of just going about my day here. I hope you guys like this new type of content. I hope you're enjoying the videos I already have up. I have social medias everywhere except for Instagram and sometimes Tumblr. If you're wanting to find me post more consistently, I will probably do one video a month or so at first just to get used to the prospect of using YouTube again. But on TikTok and Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Twitter, I'm active every single day, so if you want to say hi to me over there, feel free. Today I'm going to be talking about something that is kind of popular in fiction, but also kind of not. It depends on if you're a plotter or a pantser. And so what I'm talking about here is characterization in terms of specific personality traits. Now, I've talked to a lot of authors and writers in the community for the past several years, and most times writers say they either think of maybe 3 or even 1 personality trait to give their main character, or they don't do anything at all and they don't make any personality traits for their main character and just go based on vibes. Now, as an avid planner, I think everybody should do whatever works best for them, but if you're trying to plan personality traits, then I have the method for you. And today, that's going to be the 9-trait personality method. This method is a method I made up myself, I believe. I say that with a word of caution because I don't know for sure if I'm the one who created it or not, but I do know that I've used this method for years and I've taken different little bits and bobs from all sorts of writers and resources, and I decided to make my own method, which I thus dubbed the 9-trait method. Basically what this trait method is I take 3 categories of traits, and then from those 3 categories of traits, I narrow them down even more to 3 major traits. So let's get into that. Starting with the first category of traits, which is neutral traits. Now, you might be wondering, what the heck is a neutral trait? Is there such thing as a neutral trait? Well, let me start off by saying traits are complicated. Not to reference Hello Future Me. Neutral traits, like all other traits, are extremely complicated, and truly you'll find out through these personality trait videos, if I do more of them, or even just this one alone, that a good trait could be a bad trait could be a neutral trait, a bad trait could be a good trait. It's just a whole pattern. And so truly, the way that traits are differentiated between characters and the way they become good, bad, or neutral is by the way the character uses those traits throughout the storyline. So when we're talking about neutral traits for characters, you might want to base it around what you think their character acts like that doesn't have an effect for the good or the bad, that doesn't make them a worse or better person. Most other traits will do this, but say you have a character who has severe anger issues as a bad trait and is super persistent as a good trait. A neutral trait, which is squashed between those, might be something along the lines of, oh, they are very intelligent. That doesn't really have a sway on the 2 other traits. And we'll talk more about sandwiching later, and that's the term I use for pairing traits together to make them look good, because there is a system to making traits look good and cohesive across character development, and that means not just pairing traits that don't go well together. So a neutral trait is basically a trait, by Mylee's definition, that doesn't have an impact for the good or the bad. in terms of neutrality, you would want a trait that doesn't have much impact on the storyline, but has a big impact on their character. Neutral traits are not pointless. Don't get that confused. Just because they're neutral doesn't mean they have nothing to do with the character. You have a smart character who has temper issues and is also super persistent, then that's going to affect their intelligence, and that's more about what neutral traits are. Now, on to trait number 2. I should preface this video by saying each of the trait categories should also have 3 traits each, at least. Now, the reason this is called a 9-trait method is because if you have a good character, they'll have more positive traits than negative traits. So they'll have maybe 4 positive traits, 3 neutral traits, and 2 bad traits instead of more bad or equilibrium across all sides, because they're a good character and you want them to be purely good. Other characters who have other leans like gray or black morality will have more neutral or more black traits, such as the bad traits. Now to category number 2, good traits. Good traits are what they sound like. They're traits that better the character or make them seem like a good person throughout the story. These traits, when you think of them generally, might be happy, or they might be calm, or even tempered. Those are a lot of emotional traits, but we'll get into the different types of traits in a later video, just because that's a whole nother ballpark that I don't even want to get into right now. But when we're speaking about good traits, even a bad trait can be a good trait if used in the right light. Same vice versa. So say a character is super reckless, but if you make it a good trait, say they're living in a society in which people aren't allowed to do things of their own free will. In that light, and in the certain situations and events in the book, recklessness might actually be a good trait. Good traits, usually, by Mylee's definition, are traits that have a good impact on the character or their development throughout the story. Now, another thing that I want to say about good traits is that they don't always have to be good. The thing about traits is that they change via the arc of the character. So where a character that's good might start off with more good traits, if they have a dissension arc, or an arc where they become a worse person, then those traits might get slowly worse, and they might trade out their 4 good traits for 4 bad traits instead. And that's just how it goes. Now, as far as the 3rd category, we have negative traits, or bad traits, or evil traits, whatever you want to call it. Evil traits, by Mylee's definition, are ones that are detrimental to the character or put them or their goals and motives at risk during the storyline. Something that's good to note here is when you make a character with evil traits, generally those traits should always stay evil, unless a good trait is more powerful or becomes more powerful than the bad ones. A bad trait you might think of ruthlessness and brutality. Now, unlike the other trait categories, bad/evil traits is one of the only categories, actually it's the only category, of the system that I have, the 9-trait method, which some traits are just bad no matter what. Abusive and physical abusive characters, that's always going to be a bad trait unless you're some kind of lunatic. Sorry. It's good to make sure, if you want a redemption arc for a character who has a lot of bad traits, that they're flexible bad traits. Again, for the 3rd or 4th time even. I will get to that in another video. But it's good to note that when you're making a character with bad traits, if you want them to be purely bad, give them fixed traits, and if you want them to be purely good, give them something that can change over time. So a changeable bad trait would be something like irritation or intolerance. That can change, but things that are generally unforgivable to readers are things like abuse and callousness and vile evil traits that just rub you wrong. And not that they can't change, but the readers won't necessarily want them to. Now, you might be wondering, how does this all go together? You just explained what all these traits are, but you didn't explain how to make the system work. So what happens, and what I do, is I put these 3 categories onto a sheet, either digital or physical. I believe I'm showing you a physical example right here. And what I do with those is I choose whichever character I'm working on, and I give them the traits according to their personality, or what I initially envision them to be. Before I do this, I do a lot of character brainstorming, but if you want to jump right into the 9 traits, you also can explore resources like the 16 personalities, the Myers-Briggs personality test, and all sorts of things to get an idea. Even the BuzzFeed quizzes would do a good job of getting things figured out in terms of what you want your characterization to be. The only rule with this 9 trait method is there need to be 9 traits. That doesn't mean every single trait category has to have a trait in it. If they're purely evil and good, you can have 5 bad traits and 4 good traits. That's perfectly fine. But you want to make sure you stay true to the character. To give you an example of 9 traits in actual fiction, I think I will reference some books and movies I've read. The example I'm going to use in terms of movies is the Dungeons and Dragons movie, Honor Among Thieves, and this is one of my favorite movies of the year it came out. But the reason I loved this movie so much was because of the primary main character, who I cannot remember the name of right now. He is one of the best developed characters in the whole film. And if you want to look at him through the 9 personality trait type of map that I just gave you, you would say something along these lines. For neutral traits, the main character in Dungeons and Dragons has charisma, intelligence, and persistence, because they both get him in bad and good situations, but they also struggle to influence the story super drastically throughout the entirety of the film. For good traits, the main character of Dungeons and Dragons has compassion for others. Secondly, he is very brave, which is a trait that fuels him throughout most of the film and keeps him going. And third, he also is able to realize his mistakes. And yes, that is a trait. Some traits aren't just one-word vocabulary answers. There are traits that just encompass a change, and his ability to be self-aware is one of his positive traits. Now, as far as bad traits for the main character of Dungeons and Dragons film, I would say that the worst trait he has is his negligence and his self-centeredness, and also his inability to forgive. And all of these traits change later in the film. You find the main character of Dungeons and Dragons becoming a better person, being willing to forgive other people, and he even gets to the point where he's willing to give up all of the things he sought after to do the right thing. Now, you're probably wondering about the more appealing reader perspective of the 9 trait method being used in real fiction. So the book I'm going to use is actually one I am currently reading, which is The Foul Duology. I don't think that's the actual name for it, but Chloe Gong's Foul Lady Fortune Duology. And the main character's name is Rosalind. She is an assassin for an elite gang of individuals and nationalists who want to control the country of China. And her traits in the 9 trait method go as follows. For neutral traits, Rosalind from Foul Lady Fortune is patient, she's clever, and she is very witty. These both help her in the plot, but they don't necessarily affect the story in any drastic way. As she grows, they become more relevant, and some of them even change and fluctuate to good and bad traits, which is something neutral traits can do, but we'll get to that at a later date. The second and my favorite category is good traits, in which Rosalind is very technical, she is compassionate and cares a lot for other people, and thirdly, she is totally dedicated and loyal to her cause. Now, loyalty in this book is also one of her bad traits, because it leads her to places that makes her make bad decisions, and she ends up having to do things she doesn't necessarily want to do. Other bad traits Rosalind has includes her inability to face the past and her lack of self-awareness when it comes to all things romantic and job-related, and her sense of justice. Those are two real-life fictional examples of characters who could use the 9-trait method. I obviously gave them 3 traits for each category, but to be honest, with characters, especially minor ones, you don't have to do all 9 traits. This is just the baseline for main characters and villains for my stories, and I hope it helps you. But the thing is, adjust it as you need. Adjust it as your characters need. Sometimes when you write a character with only 3 traits, 1 for each category, and you do it well, it seems like your character is multi-dimensional. You know, I don't know much about Chloe Gong's writing process, but there's a good chance she didn't use the 9-trait method, and that she started off with a very simple basis, which then turned into this really deep character with very little planning. A lot of writers are like that. When you decide to use the 9-trait method, do what's best for you and do what's best for your characters. Hope you enjoyed this video. It was a lot of fun for me to make. It's more professional. I kind of look like I have a better setup now. But I will see you in the next one. Hopefully in the next couple videos we'll discuss character arcs and how their traits fluctuate and types of character traits. Until next time, see you later. My name is Mylee J. Miller and I am signing off. My cat decided to scratch at the door again.